Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 3 in our lecture for EDLE 5813. We're going to be talking about the skills-based approach to leadership. And this is a different approach than trait-based leadership is. It's in actuality, it's the exact opposite of trait-based leadership. The key thing to remember when you're thinking about these approaches, is that trait-based approach to leadership believes that everybody has natural innate skills that make them a quality and a qualified leader. Under the skills-based approach, we're worried about technical, human, and conceptual skills, and we also have this belief too that leadership can be trained and it can be learned. So the big idea from this chapter is this notion of technical skills, human skills, and conceptual skills in leadership. Let's look at each of these skills one at a time before we look at what this means in an actual leadership context. So, technical skills are normally specialized competencies that are specific to a particular industry. In education, I always liken this to being able to use a computer appropriately, being able to conduct the teacher evaluation by using the tool, not necessarily having the skills to do the evaluation itself, but using the tool. Being able to do any specific products or process that come along with your job. Lower levels of management tasks, so things like filling out discipline forms, filling out tardy forms, that would basically be the technical skills of leadership. The human skills are kind of the ones that are in the middle. They're the ones that are of high importance, but they're also the ones that you basically have to have in order to be effective in education. You have to be able to create an atmosphere of trust with your stakeholders. You have to be able to communicate well with a bunch of different teachers. You have to be able to make sure that teachers understand who you are and the approach that you're taking. You have to make sure that you understand their perspectives and they understand your perspectives as a leader as well. The conceptual skills are things that are basically your big ideas and your overarching themes in your educational environment. So this is doing mental work, shaping policy, working with big ideas, creating a strategic plan. These are big and these are important at the top levels of management and organization. So I always ask the question if you know what your school district strategic plan is. Because knowing what a strategic plan is and being able to articulate it effectively is one of the biggest challenges. As part of this course and as part of your certification exam, you should really understand what a vision for a school is and what a strategic plan is. You're going to hear me say a number of times in this course, know the idea of what a 1-year plan is, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan is in terms of your leadership abilities and your leadership capabilities. And you have to ask yourself, does the mission or vision statement in the district accurately reflect what the school district is trying to accomplish? Same with the strategic plan. You should have at least a 1-year, 5-year, and 10-year. Here's why. Many people within schools don't necessarily know who the next people are going to be. You have to plan for who the next leaders are going to be, who the next potential superintendents are going to be, who your teacher leaders are going to be if you have teachers that are pursuing administrative jobs. The average principal stays slightly less than 5 years in their current position. Because of that, it's imperative that you have a strategic plan on what you're going to be doing and what it's going to look like for the next 5 to 10 years. Think about the fact that we have so many districts in this state, and also the fact that you're looking at districts that are seeing changes to their population over and over and over and over again over the course of 5 to 10 years. And the problems that you'll see in Tulsa and Oklahoma City might be school consolidation. So what's the plan for school consolidation? The problems that you're seeing in Broken Arrow and Jenks might be overpopulation. What's the strategic plan for that? So try to think about that and understand whether or not your building or district has a strategic plan. So when we're looking at the CAT's perspective on leadership, we're looking at the difference in what the expectations are in terms of top management, middle management, and supervisory management. This is probably the big idea from this chapter. From a supervisory management perspective, we're saying that the people at the lowest level of management need to have technical and human, the people at middle need to have technical, human, and conceptual, and the people on top need to have more human and more conceptual and less technical. And I agree with that. When you're thinking about this from an administrative perspective, try to think about it in the fact that as you move up the ranks, the superintendents in a true superintendency role would actually leave some of their technical power and leave it in the hand of the building principal, who would be caught in the middle because they're in the middle management role. I do view the assistant principal in the supervisory role, which would be our technical skills. In most districts, they're the ones that are handling the discipline, they're the ones that are handling any fire drills, safety concerns, things like that, things that have a technical right and wrong way of doing things. Sometimes assistant principals, depending on the district you work in, you may not do teacher evaluation. Your principal might do all of it. Sometimes you might share it and split it down the middle. I really think that matters from district to district to district. So the competency-based approach to leadership says that we're basically going to have outcomes, and you're going to learn the outcomes, and if you know the outcomes and you have environmental influences that can help you, you're naturally going to become a leader, because under the skills approach, leadership can be trained and learned. So once again, remember the point of this class. We're really talking about this class in terms of, potential skills that could be there, potential skills that couldn't be there, and that's the idea behind the skills approach. Everything can be learned, but you have to have the right people and the right environmental influence to actually teach you the skills that you need. You might not agree with this approach. You might think that leadership is inherent. If you do, then this is not one of the approaches that you want to be considering. Also remember, too, that I only want you to really worry about 3 or 4 of the chapters in this text. Sure, it's important to know these other ones, but if you're thinking about these in terms of which ones can help you develop your own leadership style, I don't want you to overthink of ones that you don't necessarily agree with. So when you're talking about the skills-based approach, there are 4 individual attributes. There's cognitive ability, crystallized cognitive ability, motivation, and personality. So general cognitive ability is how intelligent a person is. When we talked about trait leadership at first, we had this notion that intelligence is inherited and cannot be trained. Under a skills approach, we truly believe that we can teach somebody how to be intelligent just by giving them opportunities over and over and over again in being repeated to a learning environment. In schools, we're going to talk a little bit about professional learning communities in here, and I believe this can link to general cognitive ability, because professional learning communities, if you're exposed to the standards and you're exposed to the objectives and the formative and summative assessment over and over again, eventually you learn it, and eventually it becomes inherent and part of you and a part of your learning. So I asked you how many of you have used professional learning communities or been in school districts that use them. I have found that in my experience, the experience of professional learning communities really differs from person to person. Some people, some elementary school teachers love them and some don't, but most elementary people enjoy the concept because it's doing a lot of grade level teaming and working with each other, but high school teachers really are the ones that dislike them. That's been my experience working in Pennsylvania and Ohio. I don't know if that's been your experience in Oklahoma, but it's something to think about. So crystallized cognitive ability is when you have an intellectual ability learned or acquired over time. If you have exposure to learning environments because you've repeated it over and over again and you understand the concept that your organization is requiring you to understand, then you're going to have what's called this crystallized cognitive ability because you've seen it over and over again and you start to know it and it starts to become ingrained in you. When I think about this in general all across the United States, I really relate this to Common Core. In Pennsylvania, we had the challenges and problems with Common Core that were being sorted through, but in Ohio, they were adopting it without adopting it. I worked in a job that was on the border between Pennsylvania and Ohio, so I was always told to teach Common Core and have students write the lesson plans using Common Core and not using Common Core. Pennsylvania, as of the filming of this lesson, completely adopted Common Core, and it's in our schools, it's there. But in Ohio, in our schools there, they're still fighting the battle. Some districts are doing it, some districts aren't doing it, and it creates a little bit of a struggle and a challenge there as well. We've talked about this in the context of Oklahoma, and I'm a firm believer that in Oklahoma, if Common Core would have been put into the system first and done appropriately and professionally, we would have had a better opportunity to see Common Core work if it had been grandfathered in slowly instead of being pushed as a mandate. just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it if you don't. I found that Common Core was a learned experience. For people that were curriculum experts, they had continued exposure and opportunity to make it last, but they had time to learn it. In Oklahoma, it was kind of thrown at a lot of the people in a lot of the districts, and that's where the pushback came from. I always ask you, do you remember some of the learning, do you remember some of the training that came out of Common Core? And most people say that they do, just because they were exposed to it over and over and over again, and eventually something came out of it. So, when you think about motivation, there are 3 things that are linked to motivation: willingness, dominance, and social good. My belief is to be an effective learner, to be an effective leader, you have to actually want to lead. Administrators that get put in the position and don't want to be administrators, that can be an issue and that can be a problem. They don't last. They have this idea that they're going to go in and going to do it, but you can tell that they're there and they don't want to be there. You have to be confident in your abilities, and you have to want to be a leader in order to be effective. You also have to make decisions that benefit the social good. That doesn't necessarily mean social justice. It doesn't necessarily mean utilitarianism, but it means the decisions you're making are benefiting the students that are in the class, that are in the classes, and that are benefiting your teaching staff. So if you're leading appropriately, the decisions are benefiting some group of people, and they're doing it that benefits the good of others. You have to have a personality of being an effective principal in order to do it well. And when I say that, what I mean by that more than anything else is you're going to have things that are going to bother you almost every single day in this position. When you talk to somebody, you have to always tell them you're doing great and ask them about them. And if you do this, it's the best thing that you can do for your teaching staff, because you don't want to show them the struggles and the challenges that you're facing. Leadership outcomes are mostly tied to problem solving and performance. Problem solving is how people work together to find a logical and effective manner of a solution. But in schools, you ask yourself, who normally is benefited the most by problem solving and performance? I would argue it's the teachers more than anybody else, because you have your teaching staff, and if you have the opportunity to help them solve problems and improve performance, they're going to be the ones that are affected the most. And in theory, they're actually going to help the students then, which in turn helps the parents, and in turn makes your job easier as a principal. So when you're thinking about outcomes for performance, you're worried about the performance of your teachers, and that's also why we have an instructional supervision class at this institution. So your career experiences are based on whether or not you have challenging assignments, mentoring, appropriate training, and hands-on experience with novelty. We're going to cover each one of these individually. So challenging assignments are important in education. Most people will not stay in a position if the organization does not offer some sort of a challenge. Some people do stay in jobs that were easy, but this is also the concept of the rotating school principle. If you're looking at some of the larger urban school settings across the United States, once somebody gets too complacent in a school as a principal, sometimes they're rotated out and they're put in a different area so that they have a new challenge and a new opportunity. Mentoring, I've done a lot of work with mentoring and mentor programs, take this for what you will, but the best mentors come from outside the organization or individuals that don't know the inner workings of an organization. You're going to have to make a decision, and you're going to have to make a choice as to whether or not you want your mentor to come from internally or externally. My advice always is you find at least one person that is not in your school district, because then you can vent to them, you can get their opinions on things, and that can give you a good opportunity to understand the inner workings of the organization. The question that I ask here, I ask how many of you really have been benefited between the mentoring programs that exist at your district. A lot of people tell me that it's very contractual, and it's more or less you just sign a sheet and it's in and out more than anything else. If the program exists and there's a mentoring or induction program, that's certainly something that can help you. You have to be effectively prepared for the position of a leader. Appropriate training is not training for the position. It's relevant for wherever you go, and it's also organizationally specific. You're learning in Oklahoma State's program how to be an effective leader in the state of Oklahoma, and then potentially from a national perspective. But training is different in different organizations. What you need to know in Broken Arrow is different than what you would need to know in Stillwater or Oklahoma City because of demographics, because of population shifts, and I think that's important to note. The training provider themselves have an important role in your preparation. We have to give you honest and relevant information. The best thing that can happen to you is that you have a bunch of different people that are preparing you essentially to be principals, and you have different leaders and different perspectives so that you're learning appropriately. That will help you better when you're working in schools and you're working with school leadership. So on your plan of studies in the state of Oklahoma, you have 2 internships, but you only have 6 classes that you have to take in order to be certified as a principal. 2 practical-based internships that you'll do at probably your school district, but then you'll have 6 additional credits. You'll have law, organizational theory, school finance, principalship, leadership theory, and instructional supervision. You'll not have a human resources class, but you can take that as an elective. Think to yourself which classes are the least beneficial and the most beneficial to your training. Some people would say that finance and law, you have to be in the district and you have to understand how it works there. But I think having a conceptual background of law and finance is something that can help you and something that can take you farther. And I think it depends on your experience in the structure of the organization more than anything else. So, novelty in your position is your ability to learn from unplanned experiences. This is a role and this is a position that is going to be uber challenging for a lot of you, and you're going to have to deal with things that come up that you never expected to happen. So my dissertation actually looked at what happens when unplanned events occurred, and what gets sacrificed and what works and what doesn't work. I'll kind of show you what the framework of one of my dissertation parts. I asked people what gets done because they're responding to unplanned activities or emergencies, and then I stratified them based off of stress and autonomy. LS stands for low stress, LA stands for low autonomy, HS stands for high stress, and HA stands for high autonomy. For most people, observations and walkthroughs were the most common answer of what gets sacrificed more than anything else on their actual time involved in things because they were dealing with unplanned emergencies. Anybody that was of the 12 high-stress people that I interviewed, 9 out of 12 said that observations and walkthroughs were sacrificed to respond to unscheduled events. I'll give you an example of something that a high-stress administrator said. They basically said that I had to drop everything to deal with a fight. I had to deal with drama. I had to deal with an angry parent. And the classroom observations just got pushed to the side and didn't get done. That's very common in this role and in this position. It's something you have to prepare yourself for. Your organization will determine whether or not you have any of these unplanned experiences in problems that happen. Some of you will work in organizations where there are hardly any and it's simple, and you'll have a very good career that's easy and it's structured and you'll know what to expect on a daily basis. Some of you are going to be under a ridiculous amount of pressure in this position. And that's why I think organizational theory is so important, because organizational theory really says this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is how one school is structured, this is how one school operates, and that's a lot different, and why I think it's important for all of you is future school leaders to understand something with organizational theory. So environmental influences have a huge impact on your experiences as a leader. They're both internal and external, and we're going to talk about each one of those. So internal environmental influences are the things that impact you on a daily basis. This is your school board members, this is your building safety and security, this is the technology, these are the people that come in, these are your parents, these are your students, these are how many years of experience your teaching staff has. You get these daily and you have to deal with the internal influences. My advice is this: avoid the external influences as much as you possibly can. You have no control over these. They're here, they exist, and you can't stop them. If the state says you have to use a different set of standards, that's what it is. If the state says that you're stuck with Common Core, it is what it is. Don't waste your time arguing on these types of reforms. You have little control over these, especially if you're not in a large urban district. You changing an external environmental influence as a building principle probably will not happen. It's not going to happen in most of your school systems. You're a building principle. The fact that we have 500 plus school districts in this state makes it even more